Jets fans, another name, another coordinator interview. What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Jack Talks Jets. And today we are going to be discussing the New York Jets requesting to meet with the Minnesota Vikings defensive passing game coordinator Daronte Jones to fill in their missing defensive coordinator job that fortunately Steve Wilks was fired for just around a month ago. We're gonna be discussing who is Daronte Jones, the pros and cons of this interview, and why I think maybe it could be a good thing the Jets hire him, or maybe some bad things on why I think the Jets shouldn't hire him. Let's get right to business, everybody. Let's start by talking about who Daronte Jones is. Daronte Jones was a defensive coach in college for a little bit and then moved over to the NFL, where he is currently with the Minnesota Vikings as their defensive passing game coordinator, along with he worked with the names of such as Brian Flores and his defense, which is we'll get to that in just a minute on the positive sides. And here's the thing. Before we get into the cons, let's go over the positives real quick, because I think we should do the positives first and the negatives. Some positives are, I mean, the guy's young. The guy is young. He's a modern defensive. I think the younger you are, the more of a modern defensive mindset you have to have in the NFL. Point blank period. There's really no other way to say it. If you're young and can't really produce produce at least a decent defense, then I don't think you should be a defensive coordinator in the NFL. At this point, it's a young man's game. I don't believe that the Jets should hire a defensive coordinator that's over the age of 52, maybe 50 to 52. I would say is where I would cut it off for the Jets to hire any coaches from here on out. Aaron Glenn. Here's my thoughts on Aaron Glenn. I'm gonna get a little sidetracked for a second. I'm gonna make a whole video on this very soon. I know a lot of Jet fans want Glenn out. All right. I think we need to give him at least another year. And hey, if I'm wrong about that, fine, can him. I get him gone next year. But in my opinion, Rome was not built overnight. And I get it. Glenn had historically bad stats as a first-year head coach. I get it. But here's the thing. If Aaron Glenn can build the culture here, can get this team at least to compete next season. Look at the roster Aaron Glenn had this season. A terrible defense, a not that great of an offense. In fact, a terrible offense, actually. Besides maybe the offensive line and Breece Hall, that's really it. His special teams unit, arguably the greatest Jets special teams unit to ever exist. But here's the thing. Aaron Glenn, sure, he had some flaws. A lot of flaws, actually. A lot of false promises and a lot of false hope. But here's the thing. With the roster he had, I think you at least have to give him one more year. That's just my stance on it. That's the bottom line. If I'm wrong, then I'll admit that I'm wrong next season. But for now, I think you have to give Aaron Glenn another chance. Back to Daronte Jones. I'm so sorry, everybody. I got sidetracked there for a second. Let's start with the pros of Daronte Jones, like we did a couple minutes ago before I got sidetracked. Another pro is that he could have a lot of exposure to multiple modern defensive systems, which kind of ties into the young modern defensive mindset that he needs to have if he were to become a defensive coordinator in the NFL. He's, in my opinion, especially another on the staying on the track that he's young, I think he is likely to be very adaptable to the Jets personnel. He's working with a lot of young guys. I think the oldest guy on the Jets defense, it might be Brandon Stevens, honestly. I'll have to think about that. I'm probably wrong. Oh no, I think it's Harrison Phillips, actually. I believe it's Harrison Phillips, I believe, is the oldest player playing for the current Jets defensive unit. So again, he's working with 10 out of 11 really young guys for the Jets this season if he were to get hired by this team, which is a pro. I think, again, young guys and young guys go together. If they build off each other, I think that can make a good defense in the league. Unlike last season, Steve Wilks would not adjust his play style, and that's why I think most of the time this defense did not do good at all. He didn't adjust. He didn't adapt to the game it is today. He was still looking like a defense that maybe would have worked 10 years ago. And I will admit, Steve Wilks did have successful units in the past in the NFL. But it is recent couple seasons with his defensive unit in Carolina, that was one of the worst defenses in the entire league. He just cannot adapt, which is a reason why I believe a major factor in why the Jets fired him. And I totally agree on that. Like, if I was Woody Johnson or if I was Darren Muji or Aaron Glenn, I would notice that right away. I wouldn't want that in my building. I'd can the guy as well. So I think that's a good thing that Daronte Jones can bring to the building. Low ego. I think he has a low ego. I think he's I think he's a coach that players would think of as very coachable. I mean, if you're teaming up with Brian Flores in Minnesota, at least you have some type of experience with building a good defense. Because arguably, the Minnesota Vikings had a top 5 defense in the NFL this year. Their record may not have shown it on paper. However, if you really look at Minnesota's defense this year, I believe they had a top 5 defense in the entire NFL with Brian Flores and Daronte Jones, who, by the way, had a pretty big role in the defense. The defensive passing game coordinator. I mean, that's a pretty big role to have on the defensive squad. So I think that's a pro to have, especially if you're looking to interview for as a first-time defensive coordinator. And that's where we move on into the cons, which is actually our first con, is that he has no experience as an NFL defensive coordinator, which is something I am worried about. In my opinion, I think the New York Jets should go after names like Raheem Morris or Jonathan Gannon or Don Wink Martindale. Right? I'm actually writing an article for Roundtable Sports on that. I'll post a link on my Twitter account once that is published. But in my opinion, like guys like Raheem Morris or Jonathan Gannon, I get Morris is on the older side, but he's shown that he's one of the very few head coaches in the NFL, or former head coaches and former coordinator, excuse me, that can still run a productive defense at such an age that he is right now. I mean, Morris, like I said, he's on the older side of NFL coaches, but he arguably had a top 5 defense with the Los Angeles Rams just 2 years ago. So just 2 to 3 years ago, he had a top 5 unit with the Rams, which is why I think hopefully that he can maintain that success with the Jets if they're able to hire Raheem Morris. Same with Jonathan Gannon. Gannon's on the younger side now. And we're talking just 2 years ago when he was the defensive coordinator for the Eagles. He brought them to the Super Bowl. I mean, if you have, and I looked at the stats with him, I believe he was first in interceptions or first in turnovers, something along the lines of that, which, again, Jets desperately need that next season. 0 interceptions in one season. Absolutely pathetic. They cannot have that ever again. I don't think that record will even be broken. I mean, how really can it be broken unless they tie the Jets? That record will never be broken, by the way. That is the most Jet thing to ever happen. But anyway, I'd rather hire guys like Morris or Gannon just because of their experience levels over Daronte Jones. That's one of the biggest cons I have with Jones, is that he has no experience whatsoever as an NFL defensive coordinator. He's never called plays at this level. He's learning a job in New York. I mean, the New York media, that's kind of a tough place to start, especially if you're a first timer. I get Tanner Engstrand. I think Tanner Engstrand on the offensive side of the ball had a pretty solid year. I can see what he's trying to build, and I could respect that. But Daronte Jones, again, like at least Tanner Engstrand has 1 year in, right? So I'm getting comfortable with him. Jones has no experience whatsoever as a defensive coordinator, especially if he's learning the job in New York. A defensive coach learning for the first time learning the job in New York has to be what I believe one of the hardest coaching jobs in the entire NFL. And the pressure can get to him, and I believe it might. Because you can deny all you want. Oh, pressure never got to this guy, that guy. Guarantee you, I almost 100% guarantee you the pressure did get to him. They just didn't want to show it. Because again, it's the New York media. They will catch on to anything, criticize you for anything. So that's another one of my cons. His scheme identity, though, is unclear. If I had to guess, he'd probably do something similar to Brian Flores' defense in Minnesota. But other than that, I just don't really know what his exact scheme would be with the Jets. If it's something like the all-out, like, burst kind of defense, if you know what I'm saying, like the very aggressive style defense that Robert Saleh and Jeff Ulbrich had, I think that'd be a great usage for this Jets team, especially because that's what they thrived on under the Saleh era. I get it. Half of the defense is not even what it was just 2 years ago with Saleh. But I think if you still develop that, and for the veterans that are still on this defense that were there, I think they would be a great mentor to the young guys to teach them how to play that aggressive style of defense. That's just my opinion. But I mean, if I was able to have a clear scheme, if I was able to know what Jones's scheme was clearly, maybe I'd put that as a positive, right? But it's unclear. We don't even know. The guy's never even called plays as a defensive coordinator in the NFL before. So that is another con on this list. Another con I think he has is he's or excuse me, the Jets have. This is what I'm really looking for. It's not really, it's more so on Daronte Jones. This is more so on the Jets themselves. Is the risk and the past failures of NFL defensive coordinator hires like Steve Wilks, arguably the most disappointing hire of the 2025 offseason. I mean, this guy, for me at least, I was projecting this guy to be money. I thought he was going to be a very good coach for the Jets. I thought he was going to be the best Jets coach on the entire squad this season. Turns out he ended up being the worst. Our special teams coordinator, Chris Banjo, praise to Chris Banjo. I mean, honestly, that might be the best coaching I've ever seen in my entire life of being a Jets fan. But I mean, Wilkes had all of the potential in the world. He's proved that he can make good defensive units in the past, as he did. But like I said, he can't adjust, and that's what I've figured out this season throughout the entire course of the season, and it's disappointing. Jeff Ulbrich, okay, I think it was a good defensive coordinator as a interim head coach. He was terrible, right? I mean, his play calling, especially in the 2024 season, even end of 2023, to be honest with you, his play calling was not that great, and his scheme was not that great at the end of 2023, like the last 4 games maybe, and then throughout the entire 2024 season. Even before he became the interim head coach, I think he was still struggling at the defensive coordinator position, which is why I think he was good, but I don't think he was good enough to be a playoff defensive coordinator, as he's shown with those struggles in Atlanta with as their defensive coordinator this season. And it's before that was Greg Williams. Arguably, he might be up there with Wilkes for one of the worst Jets defensive coordinators in the entire game. To be honest with you, it's just that's just really my only concern at the moment. But anyway, like it's just if we were able to see, if we were able to trust Darren Mucci, which I do have trust in Darren Mucci. It's just hard to put this into words. I have trust in Mucci, but not enough to the fact where I know that we're safe, right? Because he hired Steve Wilkes. I think a lot of just the defensive coaching in general just needs to be cleaned house. I think the DB's coach needs to be gone. The linebackers coach needs to be gone. Just a lot of the defensive assistants, I think we just need to clean house on almost the entire defensive unit. Maybe not the D line coach. Maybe even him, honestly. I think we just need to clean house on the defensive assistants, defensive coaching side of the New York Jets. Um, you know, this is not the job to figure it out. It's the job to come in and say, okay, here's the plan. We're gonna go rock and roll, right? It's not a figure it out job. It's not a more than 1 year job. Football and defense. The defensive side of football is arguably one of the most important things of the game. I get it. It's an offensive driven league, especially within modern day, but defense is still so important. You can have a top 10 offense in the league, but if you have a really crappy defense, for example, the 2025 Cincinnati Bengals had a great offense. I still think they have one of the best offenses in the league. If Joe Burrow didn't get injured, that offense, I think, would have been a top 5 offense in the entire NFL. But that Bengals defense was absolutely horrible, and that's really what prevented them from getting some wins. I believe they went 6-11 this year. I think if they had a competitive defense, they would have went 9-8 or 10-7, in my opinion. So a horrible defense can derail you really your entire season. So that's why I don't think it's not a figure it out job. You have to, a defensive coordinator has to come in here knowing what to do, knowing the defense top and bottom before they even get here. After the interview, they should study the team, know what they have to do. Hell, Woody Johnson and Darren Mucci just need to find the guy that'll make the players better. I mean, Wilkes' scheme and the players did not mix together. They need to find a guy who will play New York Jets style defense like the Saleh and Ulbrich one. That's just my opinion. We need to find a guy like that. Raheem Morris, prime example, very aggressive on the blitz, very great in changing his coverages from, let's say, one high safety over to cover 2 in an instant. He's able to adjust. He's able to coach how his players should be coached, and I think that is one of the best things you can hire in a defensive coordinator, which is why, in my opinion, I know this video is about Daronte Jones, and I'm reporting that the Jets did request to meet with him. But in my opinion, again, I'm going to make a whole separate video on this as well. I think Raheem Morris or Jonathan Gannon is the best bet for the New York Jets to have a successful defense in 2026. I mean, what this is telling us currently, moving on from the cons, what this interview is telling us about the Jets is that the Jets are casting a wide net, right? They're not picky about who they want to hire. They're kind of desperate at this point to just get a name, get a competitive guy in the building, and build this defense up from the ground up. Because currently it's on the ground, they got to build it from the ground up. If they can hire a guy, they're not really locked into big name defensive coordinators either. The first name we heard was Daronte Jones, not even Raheem Morris or Jonathan Gannon, which could be a little concerning for some, but hey, I think you have to trust the process here, what Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji are doing. And the Jets are willing to explore upside over safety, which is something I really do respect out of Darren Muji and Aaron Glenn. This may not be the best, interview, but at least they're trying, right? I can see that they're, again, like I said, they're not being picky. They're going out there, interviewing different names, starting with Daronte Jones. Hopefully it gets to Raheem Morris or Jonathan Gannon. Those are my two guys I really want the Jets to get. And yeah, I mean, those are just my final thoughts. Again, I don't hate the interview, but I don't think I'd be comfortable with the hire, if that makes sense. I don't hate the interview at all, but I wouldn't be comfortable with it. The main reason why is just, like I said a couple minutes ago, he has no experience. That's my main issue. But anyway, Jets fans, let me know, are you intrigued or terrified by this interview in Daronte Jones? Subscribe if you're suffering through this offseason with me as a suffering teenage Jet fan. If you're new, make sure to hit that subscribe button. We are road to 350 subscribers. If you like the video, make sure to hit that like button, and I will see you all next time. Peace out, Jet fans.